Afternoon all. China is becoming a major force in the world of chess. Ding Liren is the #2 Chinese Grandmaster, FIDE rated 2707. Let's look at his game against Levon Aronian. So d4, d5, c4, c6, the Slav defense, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, and now Levon plays a6. This is often provoking white into eventually playing c5, so black can usually strike out at some point, hopefully, with e5 or undermine with b6. White plays for the moment e3, and after e6 we do see this c5. Now you might think this is a bit strange to hem in the bishop. This is a plan which Levon has used in the past. Basically the bishop can sometimes be exchanged off like this for white's light square bishop, and that will solve the major piece problem. The knights can live in this position, but it's the c8 bishop which is of great concern. Look at all these pawns on light squares. We see knight bd7, b4, now b6. So it's not just about undermining the structure here, it's about facilitating a light square bishop exchange. Bishop b2, a5, a3. So that's the square is almost available for use at some point soon. For the moment though, b5 could be a strong reply. Bishop e7, bishop d3, both sides now castle, and here is where black actually does play bishop a6. White plays knight e1, keeping the tension in the position, letting black the decision to take this bishop or not. But Levon plays bishop c4, which is interesting. He wants to get a square, a light square like d5, if he can manage it, and that could be useful for black. But on the other hand, there's a downside to this, that it liberates potentially this e pawn, and that comes with some benefits potentially. White did actually take, so after taking he threatens now the pawn to encourage it to be protected, but Levon indirectly protects it with rook b8. If the pawn is taken, if we take the pawn here, then taking, and then black has knight takes c5 with an equal position because of this pin on the bishop. So for the moment, rook a2 was played. It looks a little bit artificial, but it renews this threat of queen takes c4. That's protected. But now this downside, although black might have some more light square access, that's squished out with e4, that d5 control. Rook b7, and now knight c2 protecting both d4 and b4, and this is quite important now. After knight b8, white doesn't have to worry about d4, and even against knight a6, the knight is waiting, protecting b4, so it's less hassle for white. The rook's really done its job and returns down to a1. Queen c8, rook ad1, the rook's nicely centralized. White's position looks very, very nice. And in fact, there seems to be an ominous idea of e5 already here for knight e4 to d6 to celebrate this advanced pawn on c5. After rook d8, for the moment though, white plays bishop c1. We see knight a6, bishop f4, as though there's an interest potentially in playing d5, potentially. Rook bd7, h3. Now we see knight e8, and the knight retreating like this it means that d5 can't be pounced in on an e5. Black can't use that d5 square. For the moment though, white plays queen e3. For example, if he did play e5, then actually black can reroute any knight, either knight to d5 in any case. So queen e3 for the moment. But now there's a great temptation after bishop f6 to concede the d5 square and go for this kind of bind on the d6 square. And white goes for it. He plays e5. Okay, Levon's been a bit provocative maybe, but he wants that d5 square. Both knights can reroute to that d5. But white's getting a knight on d6 here. So we see this counter strategy, getting the knight to d5, knight d6, queen a8, and we've seen this in past Levon games that this a file could be useful as well after the exchange of the light square bishops. This a file can be useful for black. Queen g3, hinting at black's king side, but for the moment it doesn't look as though it's that easy to get any direct attack. Knight d5 as well seems quite a dangerous centralized knight, putting pressure everywhere on the board in multiple squares. b4, f4. We see knight e3 trying to challenge that knight, but now this knight is becoming greedy. Levon plays knight c3, and there's numerous threats here. If the rook plays to d2, then actually black has bishop takes d6 and then knight e4. Nasty fork, nasty knight. If rook c1, even greater disaster lurks here. Knight e2 check, family fork. So actually this knight, which was positionally based provocation from Levon, seems to be getting material here, potentially. Even rook d e1, which as played, basically it loses material by force, because bishop takes d6 is now played. E takes d6, which extends the scope of the bishop at least to give it the e5 square. That's an important consideration there. Knight e4 is winning material by force. It's attacking the queen and also threatening knight d2, and there's a hemmed in rook. So it's winning the exchange by force. Very interesting, but white has this mass of pawns here. So he's not too concerned. He plays queen h4, keeping an eye on d8 as well. Knight d2. And now a very, very nice tactical move, knight d5, attacking the knight and also threatening knight b6. So an automatic recapture has the option of knight b6. And we see that. Knight takes f1, knight b6, attacking the queen. Queen a7. Rook takes f1, and Levon is keen just to give back the exchange if white wants to win back the exchange. Knight f6 is played, saying, you know, please take back the exchange. But here is where things get really, really interesting. White plays bishop e5, and now he's targeting black's king side. So doesn't mind being the exchange down. We see knight d5, and now something really amazing is about to happen. Knight takes d5 here is played, being content to be the exchange down, and heading to what seems to be going for a perpetual check. Black played e takes d5 here. C takes d5 is no good really because of c6. And here, unless black doesn't want to get rid of the two connected pass pawns, rook takes d6 fells to queen g3, threatening mate and d6. So black took with the e pawn, which seems logical and sensible in some respects, but now comes bishop takes g7, trying to force a perpetual check. Okay, Levon is really faced now with bishop f6 and being mated. This bishop is very powerful here. Black's king has not got much safety. So Levon, he takes actually this, allowing a perpetual check. Thinking, okay, it's going to be a draw. White's a rook down. He must go for perpetual check, surely. Well, something remarkable is discovered here. Queen f6 threatens mate. So black has little choice. He doesn't want to try and do anything else. He plays king g8, parrying the mate in one. We see check. And is it going to be a draw? Well, actually, after king g8 again, white discovers something very, very powerful in this position, that even a rook down, there's a very interesting opportunity here. White simply plays rook e1, and now there's two major threats, rook e5 or rook e3, with these entry points to try and mate the black king. A rook down. Levon plays a takes b4, and now this is a bit tricky. If white plays rook e3, then Levon has potentially useful queen takes a3 to be able to at least try and sack the queen. He's already a rook up, and this should be okay for black. White doesn't have better than a perpetual check. These pawns are pretty useful as well. This would be drawing, I believe. But white has rook e5, avoiding this queen takes a3 resource. h6 is trying to stop being mated, but now even a rook down, white simply casually plays rook h5. He's going to take a mate on h8. Levon tries queen takes a3. And here is a complication. If rook takes again, there's a potential queen sack with check and taking on h6. But this is avoided here because white takes with queen takes h6, preventing this queen sack. This is too slow. Black's threatened with mate. He tries f6, but now queen takes f6 here, and again white's threatening this mate. And actually, this is now a helpless position. Levon resigned here. He had to resign here. Let's just engine check this final position. If he moves the rook, say, he loses this one. It's a mate in 4. It's hopeless. This kind of continuation. There's no king safety here in this position. It's actually a very forced mate. Absolutely forcing mate in this final position. It's kind of an accidental brilliancy. I think white had only reckoned on a perpetual check. But it was winning. Bishop takes g7 is technically, in this position, a completely winning position. Believe it or not. It just shows that sometimes material disadvantage against king safety. This is a dramatic example, being a rook down. It doesn't matter here being a rook down. All white needs is some coordination of his queen and rook, like this game demonstrated. And there's actually no defence here. Reasonable defence for black. A brilliancy, I believe. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.